Greetings from Aztlán. The following is an interview of Dr. Armando Navarro of the National Association for Human Rights. The interview concerns the Mexican-American delegation to the Convencion Nacional Democratica that will take place on September 16, 2006 in Mexico City.
I'm joined today by Armando Navarro, an ethics studies professor at UC Riverside and also the coordinator of the National Alliance for Human Rights. Armando, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity.
Can you tell us about what the National Alliance is doing in regard to the most recent presidential election in Mexico?
Well, essentially, the National Alliance for Human Rights, which is not an organization, it's a network of individuals, activists, organizations committed to the promotion of human rights, social justice, and political empowerment. We have been very much involved in the last few, even before the election of July the 2nd, in promoting and supporting the candidacy of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And so consequently, when the results of the July 2nd election came through, and it was vividly clear to many of us, especially Mr. Obrador, that the election had been stolen from him, we became very concerned, and we very quickly established stronger ties with some of the leadership that we have contact with in Mexico, and we advised them to keep us abreast of the situation and whatever we could do over here to promote whatever organizing efforts were going to be organized by Obrador. So it has come to a time when this major event is taking place. I should say plural, these major events, not events, but events this week. And in speaking to Congressman Pepe Jaques Medina, he said this is a time for you guys to organize and send a delegation to Mexico City. We welcome you. Obrador needs support, and consequently, that's what we have done. The delegation is comprised of approximately 10 individuals. We'll be leaving from Tijuana this coming Thursday and returning next Tuesday from the 14th through the 19th. And our journey is historical because we will be participating, not just as individuals, but as delegates to not only the grito that's going to be held at the Zócalo on the 15th by Andrés Obrador, but also to the historic National Democratic Convention, which promises to attract probably close to 1 million delegates. And this is where and when Andrés Manuel López Obrador is going to promulgate the creation of a parallel government and declare himself the legitimate president of Mexico. We intend to be there, and we will be there and participating. That's phase one. The other phase is that concurrently we've been asked by the individuals that have been very active in Oaxaca with APO and the teachers union and so forth to visit Oaxaca to meet with the leadership because, as many of you know, the political crisis in Oaxaca has reached such a precarious stage where it's almost open rebellion, and there could be an all-out rebellion, so to speak, and we're very concerned about that because that has implications for Oaxaca as well as for Mexico in general. So we will be going on the 17th of September, supported by other members of other delegations and as well as deputies or congresspeople from the PRD, in a one-day visit to Oaxaca to meet the leadership, to ascertain what can be done, and ultimately prepare a report, not just on the visit with Obrador, but also on our visit to Oaxaca with the APO people in terms of the conflict in that particular state.
Can you tell me about the election, the July 2nd election? What happened in that election? And tell me about...
Well, you know, what happened in that election is subject to a lot of controversy and debate, of course. If you're a supporter of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, you'll have one perspective, and if you're a supporter of Calderón, I should say, you know, you're going to have another perspective, right? Or Vicente Fox. He's got his own perspective, which complements Calderón's. But from our perspective, we perceive the results of the election of July 2nd as a flagrant violation of the democratic aspects of what was being created supposedly under Vicente Fox, but ultimately the process that was supposed to be transparent and honest and so forth cracked with the interest of Vicente Fox now trying to perpetuate his control via the Partido Acción Nacional with the candidacy of Calderón. And from our perspective, the election was stolen. The message that Obrador made very clearly from the onset was that every ballot box should be opened, every ballot should be recounted, and let the results prove who is the legitimate president of Mexico. This whole situation that we're facing this week in Mexico could have been avoided simply by Vicente Fox and Calderon himself and IFE, and now secondly the tribunal, the electoral tribunal that made the final decision, just initiating what was commonsensical in terms of resolution of the conflict, and that was to count every vote. And so what happens, the tribunal decides to use the magic formula of only counting 9% of the so-called 244,000 votes that separated Calderon from Obrador. So this whole situation has really precipitated a major crisis for Mexico, a crisis that's unprecedented, a crisis that threatens civil unrest, a crisis that could be a powder keg situation with implications not just for Mexico but for the United States as well. In particular for us as Mexicanos and Latinos in this country, we see the correlation there of a major situation that could impact us in a worse way than the way we're facing today with the increasing nativist attacks from the extreme right. So it could just be much more exacerbated by these elements calling for possibly closure of the U.S.-Mexico border if civil unrest begins to really accelerate, if the exodus of migrants continues to accelerate. Believe me, there will be a call for direct action from the U.S. And already we are receiving reports that as of 2 weeks ago or so, a Special Forces unit of officers and so forth from the U.S. Army visited the Mexican military in preparation for contingency plans to protect Mexico's oil fields. Why is that? I raised the issue of why is it that the president in May made the decision to have 6,000 National Guard troops along the U.S.-Mexico border. That's not that's not a coincidence. That's something about called deliberate planning. And obviously the CIA, I should say, and the National Security Agency and all these intelligence entities, including the CIA, know the potential volatility of Mexico, and already the United States, I think, is preparing for it.
Can you explain the significance for the average person here in the United States, why it's important that we be paying attention to what happens in Mexico right now?
Well, what happens in Mexico ultimately is going to impact us here. I don't care if you're Latino or non-Latino, because with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, there's over $70 billion of trade that take place between the United States and Mexico. The greatest exporter Mexico has is the United States. That's the nation that it trades the most and so forth. So from an economic perspective, something happens in Mexico, it will be obviously felt in the economic arena of our country, especially in the oil part of that. Mexico is a major oil producer and exports great quantities of oil to the United States. So there's many implications, especially on the immigration situation. For us, it is something that has to be looked at in terms of looking at the profile of both leaders, Calderon and Obrador. Again, if you're concerned about immigration reform, you ask the question, which of these two individuals can do much to uplift the level of prosperity for Mexico, where Mexico's greatest export is not its people, but essentially it's other products that are exportable through the manufacturing process, the trading process, agricultural process, whatever it is people right now, over 1 million, that come across that border every year. So I would say to people here, if you think we have an exodus today of 1 million people, if the situation becomes increasingly exacerbated in Mexico, that number could double and triple, and that would create a major, major crisis in terms of the U.S.-Mexico border.